Monroe Howard is a licensed master social worker. He's a therapist, he's a motivational speaker, and an educator. And he's known for his work as a life coach and an advocate for both mental health and LGBTQIA plus awareness and issues there. And he continues his effort as a therapist, both in private practice in Maryland and Virginia, and as a part-time faculty counselor at Montgomery College, which is how we were connected. Professor Howard holds a Bachelor of Science degree from California State University in Sacramento and a dual master's in social work and public administration from New York University. He's been the host of a podcast called The Naked Truth Experience, which is a Facebook and YouTube series that celebrates marginalized individuals and the communities that they represent. And I've just learned that he is also working on another series, and maybe he'll tell you a little bit about that as well, that is for therapists and working in mental health issues. But tonight he joins us to share his insights and strategies for navigating the waters of the transfer experience. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Professor Howard, and we'll get started.
Rebecca,
Welcome.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. I appreciate you for, first of all, inviting me here today. I'm so excited to have this conversation this evening. And I use conversation intentionally because I know we are small and mighty right now, but I'm hoping for the live participants that there will definitely be some dialogue happening, because that is the type of presenter that I am. I love group interaction. And so there will be some opportunities where I'd like to have some discussion. But again, just really excited to be here. I've just hit my 1-year mark actually this month here at Montgomery College when I relocated from New York City to the DMV area. So thank you very much, Ty. Listen, Ty, you're going to be my best friend because I see you already in the chat. John, thank you for the thumbs up. I love it. But yes, I'm so excited to be a part of this esteemed faculty and staff. And this is just another great opportunity to really pour into the community here at Montgomery College, and to also be poured into from the community of Montgomery College, which has been my experience thus far. So as Rebecca talked about, we're going to talk a little bit about the approach and the experience of the transfer planning process. Here in my academic advisor role, I do have the opportunity to work with students quite often as they start to think about their transfer planning, and some who may be further along in their transfer planning process. So there is a wide range of experiences that I have with those students, because we're navigating maybe different emotions as they are at different stages. What I had stated in before we started the presentation, that this will not be, I like to manage expectations. This will not be a technical presentation on how to transfer, right? Because we have some wonderful resources that I will definitely reference in today's presentation on how you can transfer, right? We have wonderful counselors and also some online resources that you can utilize and access. But I really want to just talk about the experience and how approaching this experience can really impact that process. And at the end of the day, I want to be able to hopefully help give some guidance or some tools or resources for you to reduce any anxiety or stress that you may be feeling around this transfer process. So again, I'm really excited to share this with you. So don't worry, transfer happy. Now, I want to first say this because language means a lot to me. Words mean a lot to me. Words can really elicit a lot of different emotions and feelings. So when I say don't worry, transfer happy, I want to make sure for any participant who may be live here today or who may be experiencing this in the playback, that this is not to minimize your feelings or emotions that you may be experiencing right now. Or if you are someone who is not yet entered into the transfer process, but you are thinking about the transfer process, there may be some anxiety or some worry that is coming up. What this title is meant to do is to hopefully inspire some hope, to let you know that there can be a very positive experience in the transfer process, and even navigating the anxiety or the worry, that you can transfer happy. So that was important for me to make sure that I point out, because as a therapist and just as a person, right, we don't want to minimize feelings and emotions. And that's something that we run into all the time. And we do want to make sure that we are validating people's experience. Okay, this next slide has already been done. Again, this is just a little bit about my bio. Again, I am a licensed master social worker and a therapist here. So we're just going to dive into the meat of it, right? I'm going to minimize this just a little bit so I can see my slides. There we go. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of start out with the elephant in the room, right? The elephant in the room, and to really call out what some people may be experiencing or feeling at this moment. Now, this is a list that was, conducted through research by College Magazine from a 2016 article, but it points out 10 things, and it's actually 11 things because I added one thing, right? But 10 things that scare transfer students. This is not an exhaustive list, right? So there may be things that you are considering or that you're contemplating at this point that may not be included on this list. And I actually want to hear from you, but I want to just kind of highlight a few things and maybe elaborate on them. So, number one, explaining your life story, right? When you are thinking about applying to a college or university, one of those things is that infamous essay, right? They want to know who you are and what makes you so unique and so special for you to be considered for admissions to this college or university, to this institution. And some may say, okay, well, like, yeah, I like talking about myself. But for others, that actually is very anxiety provoking, right? Because your story may have some traumatic instances, some post traumatic items, or there may be some actually sustained trauma, because maybe you are still dealing with some of the things that actually make up who you are and how you present, how you engage with the world. So explaining your life story may be something that makes you very apprehensive to enter into this transfer process. Feeling like a freshman all over again, right? You're leaving one institution being kind of like at the top, knowing where things are, not getting lost anymore, and you're actually giving guidance to people on the campus, and now you are approaching, anticipating being in a new environment. And depending on what institution you go to, that environment may be larger in size, maybe larger class sizes. And again, not knowing all the ins and the outs, you may be experiencing or anticipating some of the emotions that may come up in terms of having to start all over again, right? Even though you may be transferring in at the junior level, maybe with just 2 more years to go, but you still are new to that campus, right? So that may be something that you are experiencing or feeling. Number three, not getting the typical college experience. One of the things is that if you've not been able to experience college, a 4 year institution right out of high school, you may feel like you missed out on some things. Here's the other thing that I want to call out here. Even if you were able to go to a 2 year institution that offered a lot of the resources and student life activities that may be offered on a 4 year campus, maybe your situation caused you to be a commuter student where you basically had to come in, take classes, and then maybe leave to go to a job or to take care of a family. And these things may feel like you have missed out on some of those traditional experiences that people talk about or people reference, right? The college experience is one where people develop lifelong friendships, where they explore and discover new identities and different interests, right? And so if you were not able to do that in a traditional sense, you may feel a little apprehensive about about approaching this process because now I'm at this 4-year institution where there may be individuals who don't have to work like I do. There may be individuals who don't have a family to take care of, or maybe a loved one who is ill that I have to take care of. There may be these other responsibilities. Here's the beautiful thing: I'm speaking from experience because I was one of those non traditional college students who I went to college right after I graduated from high school, went straight to a 4-year institution. I started my career at UC Berkeley and went through about 2.5 years, and then tragedy struck, right? My mother died, right? And having to manage and navigate those very, very intense emotions of grief and devastation, it was just too much. And I had to leave. I left. And throughout the 10 years that it took for me to return back to a 4-year institution, I had my share of coming in and taking colleges at a junior college. And as I got older and older, right, and some of the students in my classes seemed younger and younger, I felt like I was not getting the typical college experience. So that really developed some feelings of shame. There were some feelings of doubt that I had to manage. So again, right, we want to acknowledge these things as some of our experience. Staying close with old friends, right? In these 2 years or 3 years or however many years you may have been at MC or a 2-year institution, you may have developed some of those wonderful relationships. And if people are applying to different institutions, or maybe some are going straight into the workforce or doing other things, right? You may feel like we're not going to have this commonality anymore, right? Being able to meet in the common spaces on the campus or taking classes together. And so you may be lamenting some of the potential of a strain or some distance in those relationships. And relationships and community for many of us is what actually supports us through some of these very, very intense or rigorous processes, like the academic, right, experience. So we don't want to minimize maybe losing old friends. Making new friends, that's not easy for everybody. Okay, you may have some social anxiety, right, that you may be dealing with. So opening up, once again, telling your story, or explaining certain things that you may have not had to explain with that group of friends or extended family that you are used to, now can produce some fears of not being accepted, of rejection. And these are real fears that we may encounter when we're thinking about entering into a new environment. For those of you who may be thinking about going outside of your local community and now maybe transferring to colleges, even if they're in a different city within the DMV, but it's not your local community, now you have to get used to new resources, new geographics, right? Where am I going to live, right? Who am I going to hang out with? Again, we're talking about the social circle. I don't have my favorite lunch spot anymore. Now I've got to find a new lunch spot. Sometimes we minimize these things, but it is these things that bring us comfort when we might be feeling anxiety, right, or anxious. So being in a new city and having to adapt to those things could really bring about some of those things that we're talking about here today. The cost, the cost. Education keeps rising. I went to NYU, so let me tell you, once again, I know exactly what the fears are with anticipating maybe having to take out loans, maybe having to work extra jobs, maybe having to sacrifice in other areas just so that you can make ends meet. So when you are thinking about how you are going to even pay for this academic experience, that may be something that you are really you're developing some fear around, right? So the cost of college. I like this one: regretting your decision. Regretting your decision. This is probably one of the most important or consequential decisions that you may make, right? Not everybody is thinking about a graduate experience, right? So if you are saying, listen, I'm going to go get this 4-year degree and I'm done and I'm going to enter the workforce, then this may be your college experience. And so you definitely want to be able to feel good about the decision that you've made. You want to feel like it is a decision that serves you. So in your all of your research and all of your having conversations about the institution, about the campus life and the academic experience and program, you may find yourself, when it comes down to the actual lived experience, having some regrets, and that may scare you. Here's the other thing that I like to say about regretting a decision. Regretting a decision a lot of times comes up because we feel like it may define us indefinitely. I deal a lot with that when I deal with clients who are carrying a lot of guilt and shame around decisions that they've made because they feel like it is the decision that will define them forever. Or it is a decision that will have an impact that will be long lasting. It may be true that the decision may impact your experience. And we don't want to minimize that. I do want to say to you, as I say to my clients, there is always an opportunity to make another choice. Now, in making the other choice, there may be certain sacrifices or consequences. So if you get to this campus and you're like, this is not for me, right? You may choose to look for another institution. That may, as a result, you may have to go through another application process. It may add on a little bit of time. But here's the thing about decisions: you get to weigh, right, the choices, the impact, and you can make a decision on whether or not that is of great value or importance for you to have this different experience than the experience that you are having today. So I really like to empower my clients, and I would like to convey that empowerment to you today to say that even if you are making a decision at this point based on all the information that you have, and you find that maybe it's not the experience that you were hoping for, please know that you are still there is some agency for you to make a different decision if necessary. You just got to weigh out the choices. Getting lost on campus, I referenced that before, right? New geographics, that again can be very anxiety provoking, especially depending on the enormity of the campus, where the campus is located, right? Again, my graduate experience was in the smack dab middle of New York City. So making one wrong turn could end you up on some streets or places that may be unfamiliar territory to you. You may encounter some things that may be jarring, right? And so these are things that we want to consider. And then, of course, last but not least, adjusting to new academics, depending on what your educational experience or preparation. And I'm going to go even back a little bit further than your 2-year institution experience, how that has prepared you to meet the academic rigor and the expectations of an institution, again, can be something that you would need to consider or take into account when you are thinking about now approaching this new experience, this new educational experience. Am I prepared? Will I be successful? These might be questions that you may be asking yourself that, again, can elicit some very strong emotions. All right. I wanted to pull this out because when we are experiencing the worry and the anxiety and these strong emotions, it's important for us to take a look at what can be some sources, some potential sources that are fueling or that are at the root of what we are experiencing. And I want to call out, especially as an academic advisor, when a student sits in front of me, whether they are just starting out in their 2-year experience or they're on their way out and they're considering what they want to major in or study, or what they want their eventual career goal to be, family pressure can play a lot of a role in that. I put this here because if you are someone who has been, brought up to say, this is where you're going to go for college. This is what you're going to do as a as an adult in a career. It may be you're going to take over the family business, or you are expected to be a part of this industry or this group of industries, or this list of industries, right? This is what is acceptable to you. Making this transition, knowing that you are the one that is going to have to actually put in the work, put in the long hours of studying and meeting again the academic rigor and expectation that may be before you, the family pressure could be a real source of anxiety and worry for you. Not only is it just about meeting the expectations of what they have set out before you, but it's also about disappointing them, right? We can take a lot of pressure on in terms of upholding a name, a family name, or a certain image or a legacy. These things sometimes we don't really think about because they are so second nature, because it may be something that you have talked about since you were a child. But now you are at this crossroads as you have grown, developed, interacted, been exposed to a lot of different things. You yourself may have developed your own interests and passion. And if those things conflict with the family pressure or expectation, this process of transferring to another institution could be extremely tense for you, right? The thing about the family pressure that we need to keep in mind is that when I am counseling someone who is dealing with the family pressure, it is important to not demonize those individuals, the family member or the extended family that may be applying the pressure. Sometimes it's inadvertent. Sometimes they may not be conscious or aware of what they're doing. So what I like to do is to really encourage individuals to start having some open, honest communication, really exploratory conversations, to have a dialogue about what they are experiencing, what they are passionate about, what maybe some of their hopes and dreams are, so that it begins to introduce, right, the authentic expression from that individual. It doesn't have to demonize, again, the person who has these expectations, but it begins to open up a conversation and may begin to broaden the perspective of that individual. Maybe they haven't seen that side of you before, right? And just by you opening a conversation or demonstrating a skill or demonstrating a passion or an interest, may help them understand better who you are and why you may be thinking about going in a different direction. Okay. So I think that's very important. Deadlines, right? Deadlines provoke like, let me tell you something. For me, because I have a lot going on in intersections of personal and professional, my life is just driven by deadlines and the calendar. And I will be honest with you, sometimes on a Sunday night when I am looking at the week and I'm thinking about what is before me, depending on how many deadlines I have to turn something in, or to a speaking engagement, or whatever the case may be, case notes or loads, right? That can cause a lot of anxiety, just even thinking about those deadlines. And then going further to say, will I be able to meet these deadlines? So that can be something that you're looking at. In the context of the transfer process, there may be different deadlines for scholarship applications, applications for you for special programs. There are different deadlines when it comes to maybe just the application for the university or the institution that you want to go to, or college that you want to go to. But there may be also deadlines for limited enrollment programs or additional requirements for programs that you're not guaranteed to get in just because you are admitted, okay, to the university, to the institution. So you may be pressured by these deadlines. I love this one in the middle because societal expectations and stereotypes. Again, in my bio, it really talks about my passion is to work with marginalized communities. I, as a queer Black man, have an intersection of a lot of marginalized identities, some invisible and some very visible, right? But there are a lot of societal expectations and stereotypes that may be attached to some of the identities that you may possess, right? And those things can go either way, right? When in college, and you may have heard of it, the model minority, right? So when people think about stereotypes, they may say, well, people say that, everyone from your culture is smart, and so people may assume that that is, all positive, and that is supposed to, but that could also, right, create a lot of pressure that can create this perfectionism, right? You have no room for error. You have no room to make a mistake. You have no room for exploration, right? Which can be just as detrimental, or detrimental like it is if someone is assuming that based on an identity that you are not capable. So when you are thinking about these things, exploring some of those societal expectations and stereotypes that may be impacting the way in which you view your ability or likelihood is something that you also need to take into consideration, because it can go either way. People can expect less of you, or people can expect more of you, right? And they definitely have some very similar implications or impacts, right? Going each way. You may be unsure of your future plans. I see this a lot. I say, "Well, hey, so, tell me a little bit about what you might be interested in." Again, words matter. So I'm very careful to try to pigeonhole someone into saying, so have you chosen, what your career is going to be? Have you chosen, a specific major? Because what it does is sometimes unintentionally, for those people who haven't, who may have no idea, right? That may start to have them feel like, well, oh my gosh, I don't have it figured out. So is something wrong with me? Am I behind? Am I going to be successful? Right? All these things may be taking place. And I want to let you know that college is definitely a space and place for you to explore, for you to really understand what it is you like, what it is you don't like. Now, it is very true that there are some specific career paths that do require you to kind of know what you want to do, because there are some, very intense requirements or specific requirements, especially if you're thinking about things in the STEM field. If you want to be a doctor, right, there may be some specific courses that you need to take, or pathways. But I'm here to tell you also, there are some doctors who decided after undergrad, and you know what, it just meant that they maybe had to take a few classes after undergrad. Those are called, post-bac programs, right? And so those are some opportunities that still exist, even if you change your mind after, or you have a pivot, and that's okay. So, thinking about that, what are some of those potential areas? I like this one because we live in the age of social media and peer comparison. So, we're always flipping through. I'm one of those people as well. So, you're not alone. A lot of us will flip through social media and we'll see people doing all of these wonderful, amazing things. They are achieving all of these, they're posting all the college acceptances and these scholarships and fellowships. And we're looking like, whoa, I got to do that. I have to be like that. Well, here's the thing about social media and also comparing ourselves to individuals, right? One of the things is that we're really good at curating in our social media spaces the things that we want people to see. Some of these things are real, right? I would hope no one is faking their acceptances, right? And we want to celebrate those people for their achievements, but not everything is what it seems to be. And here's the other thing about social media, is that a lot of times it may feel like instantaneous gratification, but for many of these people, that is just one snapshot. It doesn't tell the full story. So if you were to dig into that person's narrative or their full story, you may discover that they have experienced or may be going through some of the same things you're going through. what we can use social media for, and even looking at peers, right, is inspiration, but it doesn't have to be emulation. I say that all the time. I want you to become comfortable with your path and with your journey. So it's really important that when you are looking at these images, when you are experiencing these stories, that you keep it in context, that you understand that there is a process behind that, right, accolade. Those things just don't come out of, air. And for some people, that's what filters are for, right? So they can make something seem better than it is. I'm gonna just leave that right there. We won't go any further. And then the last part around potential sources of worry and anxiety is this fear of failure. I mentioned it when I talked about, these expectations that are set forth. Again, it could be through family or community pressures. It could be societal constructs and stereotypes, so on and so forth. And again, they go both ways, because for some, if you are expected to do well and you fail, then you feel like you are letting down an entire group of people, versus just actually understanding that this is your path and your journey, and that you do not have to carry the weight of an entire group of people. That's one. And if you are someone who is expected not to do well, and if you fail or if you stumble, then now you may feel like you are reinforcing the stereotype, right? You are just validating what individuals may feel about a group of people. That's a lot of pressure to take on for one person, to have to carry the load of an entire group of people. But it is a real and lived experience for a lot of people who may be under the sound of my voice right now, or who may eventually watch this. So we want to definitely make sure that we take into consideration what it is what is the root of that worry and that anxiety. Okay. So here are some things in terms of, I want to get into, there is some research behind it. The first thing that I'm going to get into is really validating some of our fears and our anxieties. What I do not want to do, and this is why I started the presentation out to just say that this is not to minimize the worry that you may be feeling, or the stress, right? Stress is normal, right? We want to normalize the fact that when we are faced with something new, or something that we've never experienced, or we may have doubts about, meeting, like that is going to produce some stress and some levels of anxiety. What we want to prevent you from doing is to being paralyzed by that stress and anxiety. And so for that, this is why I went through, let's get to the root of it, because then we can begin to process some of that stress and anxiety, and or build around some supports to help us navigate those feelings and emotions of stress or anxiety. But College Board says in 2011, and again, we talked about this too, that majority of the students who attend a community college may be mature and often non-traditional, and may be underserved, which includes low-income, first-generation, and older than average students. So this again supports what we were talking about in terms of, am I going to have the traditional college experience? Did where I come from, is that preparing me for this environment, right? These may be some real lived experiences, again, and is validated by research. Bradley says credit leakage, or students transferring with many credits that don't count towards their major, it may incur some extended time, maybe overall cost of education, and there may be some disappointment in time and money wasted, right? So again, these are things that we want to consider. But here's the thing, like I stated, it doesn't have to be the end of your journey. You can take it from me. It took me a total of, I always tell people this, and they're like, what? 13 years to finish an undergraduate degree. Now, I was not in school 13 years consecutively, but from the time that I graduated, I see a heart there. Thank you, Roberta. But from the time that I graduated from high school until the time that I walked across the stage to finally get my 4-year degree, right, there was a span of 13 years. So even with these bumps, even with these setbacks, there is still opportunity for you to reach your goal. Okay. There may be some limited resources that you might be experiencing with, dedicated to helping transfer students navigate the transfer process and transition. Every institution is not the same. Every institution does not have all of the scaffolding of supports and services, or maybe the emphasis on really helping transfer students acclimate to a new environment, or maybe helping transfer students transition from one environment to the other, right? These are facts, but it is important that you are able to really assess, and I'm going further into my presentation, but you'll see it again, to assess the resources that you have available to you so that you are aware of where are the gaps. Where are the gaps? This is also a space and place. It's not comfortable for everybody, but you may have to advocate for yourself, right? Because if those resources aren't readily available or accessible, it might be something where you have to speak up and you say, actually, right, this is what I need in order to have a comfortable transition or to be able to navigate this process successfully, right? So there has to be sometimes some advocacy on your part. And hopefully the college resources or the college experience that you're having has identified some caring individuals, either in faculty, staff, or peers that can help see when you need some additional resources and be there to provide them for you. All right. And then finally, transfer students suffer from the transfer shock, which is the tendency for transfer students to experience a decrease in their GPA during the first and second term in that new institution, right? The accumulation of these challenges can result in frustration, high overcost, and negatively impact retention and engagement. There may be some growing pains. When you are transitioning from one place to another, from one environment to another, from maybe a different set of expectations, there might be some growing pains. Your system may be not in equilibrium, right? You may be in shock, right? You may anticipate some curveballs, or you may experience some curveballs that you didn't anticipate. And so that may throw you for a loop, but you can recover. Right. But these are some things that research is validating with the lived experience of individuals. Now, Professor Howard, why would you even put this before us? Because it is important as we go to the 6 ways to ease the worry, right? To validate your feelings and emotions. That's why I put it in there. Because people might come to you and say, why are you stressing over that? Like, I applied to college, it's easy. Like, or it should be easy, right? Just follow the directions or do that, right? That can dismiss the real emotions that you may be experiencing. So the first thing I want you to do is validate those feelings and emotion. It's normal to feel how I do. You might need to say that to yourself. It's normal to feel how I do, right? And then we're going to do this in an exercise in a moment. I want you to explore the core beliefs that are driving the feeling or emotion, right? This is when you get into the therapist piece, right? We'll dive into there, but we got to explore some of these core beliefs that here's how it all ties into some of those roots of the anxiety and the worry that we're experiencing. Remember, we talked about familial pressures. We talked about some of the peer comparison. We talked about some of the societal norms and expectations or stereotypes. Those things may be driving some of your core beliefs as to why this process doesn't feel as easy or as pleasurable as it may be for somebody else. So we've got to validate those feelings and emotions. The second thing that I like to walk clients through and students through is visualize your success. This becomes very personal, because you then have to start to detach from some of those projections that people put on you, or some of those things, those expectations that others may impose upon you, right? And that's not an easy process. But what does success as a transfer student look like for you, right? These may be some central questions that I want you to ask yourself. And then here's the great thing. As you are answering that question, right, there's no one way to express it, right? You may want to journal that thing on out. You may express it artistically in some other way. Maybe it's a collage. My partner and I, we do vision boards. And I love the vision boarding process because It allows me to do something that I love to do, which is take things from different sources, put it all together, and to see how, right, we can create something beautiful to me, or something that makes sense to me. So don't limit yourself in the ways in which you can visualize what success will look like for you. And I love this down here. I put this in. My worth isn't based on other people's approval. Again, there are some things that you may have to affirm for yourself. My worth isn't based on other people's approval. So my success can be my own. Okay. Number three is give yourself enough time. Now, here's the practical part of easing the worry. Here's the deal, y'all. I'm a procrastinator. My name is Monroe Howard Shackleford. I've been working on this for years and years, but I still relapse. Okay. So I know I'm not the only one. I'll touch on the procrastination in a moment. But one of the things I am learning to do, especially as the stakes get a little bit higher in terms of what I'm doing in my professional life, in my personal life, I am becoming more and more of a pre-planner, right? And really giving myself the opportunity. Here's the thing: not to live up to somebody else's expectation, but to do my best work. And so when you are talking about the transfer planning process, give yourself enough time. Start out by knowing the key deadlines, right? Knowing when applications are due, knowing when you might have to submit something for review so that it can be submitted on time, right? And that leads into the other thing about backwards planning. So if you know when that deadline is, now you can start to anticipate maybe how many weeks or how many days it is going to take in order for you to meet that deadline for those individual goals. And I've got a goal worksheet that we'll go over in a moment. And here's what I also love to do: break the whole into smaller parts, break it down. It is very hard, and it can become very overwhelming, extremely overwhelming when you are looking at this huge goal of getting into a four-year institution. So we need to break that thing on down into smaller parts so it can feel more attainable. And again, you give yourself some opportunity to really check in along the way. Because if you don't have a sense of how you can break that goal down, then you kind of find yourself sometimes just scrambling in the process because we really haven't kind of mapped that thing out. Number four, assess resources. Remember, I told you it was going to come up. Assess resources and seek information. So I put down here, we have some wonderful resources here at MC. I'd like to think that I'm part of a wonderful team of counselors that really can help you. Rebecca knows we just finished up the pre-transfer academy, where some students really got some specialized attention in helping through that transfer process with some really technical supports and really answering some questions through a series of workshops. So really seeking out some counselors that may be on site would be very helpful. Another thing is speak with the pre-transfer counselor at the four-year institution or institutions that you are considering, right? Start reaching out to them. They're an excellent resource because they will be the expert in a lot of the requirements on their campus, right? Things change all the time. Trust me. And sometimes the things that are on the web, sometimes things that are in printed form don't keep up. So some of the best ways to make sure that you have the most relevant information is to actually talk to somebody who is right there in the day-to-day operations of it. Talk to current students at the college or university that you are thinking about. It's great to get a firsthand experience. Here's the thing. Remember, we talked about filters. Brochures in colleges have wonderful marketing teams. And so they love to present things in this beautiful light. So it is very important that you actually get a firsthand lived experience from somebody who is going through it. And it's great to get experiences at different points in that journey. So maybe you want to talk to a first year student who's a freshman there. Maybe you want to talk to a person who is on their way out, right? What is it like getting acclimated to the campus? And what is it like now that you are ending your journey at the campus? How are they helping you transition out, right? And what's been your experience on the way through? Again, I mentioned using online resources is a great way to, again, seek information. I like this one because sometimes we don't plan for this, but it is necessary. And also, we are sometimes shamed for doing this. Take a break. Take a break. I'm going to reveal something to you right now. I've been speaking for a long time, but every single time I speak, there is a certain amount of nervousness, and anxiety that wells up. This time was no different. So I've been here all day working, right? I've had to take about 3 or 4 walks around the parking lot or the campus because that is one of the ways in which I begin to reduce my stress and my anxiety by being outside in nature. And the weather is wonderful now, but it just kind of helps me calm myself. I can do some breathing, some deep breathing or some relaxation. So whatever works for you, right, is something that you should employ. So taking a break is very important because this process can get very daunting and maybe overwhelming at times or stressful. So you need to build in breaks. Again, don't try to do it all at once. Break it down, right? Which goes back to backwards plan. So you're not having to do it all at once. If you're feeling overwhelmed or stuck, step away from it. When I'm developing a presentation or I'm having to submit a proposal for to present or I'm writing a note like or something like that, I get stuck often. Maybe my brain is just not there. Maybe I'm exhausted, right? Maybe my brain is saying you've done enough for today. Sometimes I may have to step away because the ideas are not flowing. When you're thinking about that personal statement or an essay, if you find yourself stuck, it is okay to take a break, step away from it, give some distance from it. Because as you may be doing one of those calming activities, this happens to me all the time. Ideas just kind of begin to flow because now I'm not right up on it. I've been right up on it, so I can't see the forest from the trees, right? Is what they say. So it's great sometimes to kind of take that aerial view and just kind of give it a rest, let it breathe. Utilize relaxation techniques to ease the pressure. I gave you one of mine, but you develop your own, right? Maybe mine is yours as well. Who knows? And then finally, celebrate the small wins. Reward and celebrate yourself along the way. It is so important to develop some incentives for achieving each component of the transfer process so that you don't feel like you have to delay that celebration, and it can be a great motivating factor. It is extremely important for you to reflect on your progress because sometimes when you look at what's before you and you think it's so far away, that can be very discouraging. But if you take a moment to say, wow, I just finished that part of the application, or wow, I just got all my letters of recommendation, or wow, I finished my personal statement, right? Or I finished that application for a scholarship, a transfer scholarship, or
Sorry, could you say that again?
oh, so
My
you got
apologies.
that is Siri. Did you hear Siri? She's listening to me and she just butted into my presentation. Anyway, technology. So, these things are very important for you to implement into your process because it really is going to help you really kind of keep grounded in the process so you don't feel like you're so far away and you're so far off. All right. These are some things. Visualizing. Did I skip? Okay, great. Visualizing your success. I don't know if this went out of order. It did go out of order. So we're going to go to exploring the core beliefs, right? Exploring these core beliefs. Here's something that I pulled out from something that I use a lot, therapistaid.com. This is a great resource, not only for us therapists, but for individuals who may be seeking some basic one pagers to really kind of explain some different activities. But when I talked about really thinking about what does, what, actually, I'm going to go back because I did do this and I did this right. Visualize success. What does success in this transfer process look like for me? And we talked about that. We said we have to do some introspection and really think about what is it that I'm passionate about? What is my core motivation for doing this? This again may challenge some of those norms or expectations that may be imposed. But it is good for you to have a why for why you are entering into this transfer process. And that why can be a lot of things, right? It doesn't have to be just relegated to a career. That why can be for a personal pursuit. That why can be for a communal goal, right? It's okay to have communal goals. And I say that because maybe the impact that you want to have on a specific community would require a certain type of education or credentialing, right? So it's okay to have a community impact goal as your why, but it is important that you're very clear about your why, so that as you are visualizing your success, you can, when those times get rough, you can attach back to that why. And that motivation can be very authentic and your own. Okay. I love this one because sometimes in goal setting, we negate how we want to feel. How do we want to feel? Do we want to feel joy in this process? Do we want some exuberance to be there, right? Jubilation. Like, what are some of these things that we want to feel in the process? So really talking about, how do I want to feel before, during, and after the process. This is really good because if you have really kind of called these things out as you are going through the process, and if you are kind of veering away from some of these emotions or feelings, it's a great litmus test for you to say, let me pause for a minute. What is happening in this experience that is really kind of causing me to veer away from the feelings and the emotions that I want to experience? And it's a great way to check in with yourself. Am I succumbing to certain norms or expectations? Am I feeling the peer pressure? All these other kind of things. Am I really having an unrealistic expectation on myself? Am I causing myself, like, everything has to be perfect? And now the process is really aggravating instead of me enjoying the process or learning through the process. And that's my last question. What do I want to learn from this process? Everything that we do, right? Successes, setbacks, failures, everything in between, right? There's an opportunity for us to learn. There's an opportunity for us to learn. And this process is no different. You might learn something else about your capacity, about your ability, about your passion, or maybe, something about your future goals during this process, because it is going to cause you to be reflective in many ways. Checking my time. All right, I'm going to get through. This also then gets really connected to the core beliefs. Like, what core beliefs do you hold that potentially impact your stress levels during this transfer process? And when we're looking at these core beliefs, these are deeply held and they influence how we interpret our experiences, right? I will provide this, Ms. Rebecca, will slides be able to be provided to participants if they want to? Because if not, you can go to therapist aid. It's fine,
I
but
think, well, we'll have the recording of your presentation is going to be up on YouTube. That may be the
perfect.
best way to get.
All right, so
Yeah.
they can reference it. Thank you so much. I just want to make sure, if you want to go back to this, because this is a great worksheet for you to really think about, what is one negative core belief that I am experiencing, or that can maybe embedded in the root of my anxiety, and then what are some evidence that is contrary to that negative core belief. So a negative core belief is that I'm not going to be successful in college, right? And that can be colored by some influences or evidence that of what people said. But we a lot of times discount the actual facts of the fact that, guess what? You are finishing up a successful experience at your 2-year institution, which hopefully gives you some fuel and hopefully gives you some evidence that you yourself can be up for the challenge, right? And then what factors inform these core beliefs? So that's something really important for you to kind of venture through in this process. Again, in some of the practical tools that we can use, we talked about it. Break down the goal of completing your transfer process into smaller tasks. This is a very simplified worksheet, and I love it because you don't have to, be tech savvy or whatever. And if you're one of those people who like to write on things, you write that big goal at the top, and then you start to break it down into individual tasks. And then when we are talking about this backwards planning, Look at the time that is required, that you anticipate that may be required. Maybe add in an extra 20 to 30 minutes just to give yourself some wiggle room, right? It may even be there for that break. And then in that schedule column, go ahead and put in there when you plan to do it. When you plan to do it. Actually make a solid plan for when you are going to do this, which leads me to bullet number 2, protect the time. So if you're going to plan to do it on Sunday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, try to block that out on your calendar. Make whatever necessary accommodations you need to. If you need to tell, family members or friends, like, hey, I really need this hour, hour and a half to really kind of work on this, then make sure you can, so you can minimize the distractions. Here we go, that procrastination monster. If you tend to procrastinate, ask yourself this. This is something that I learned later on in life. What am I afraid of? A lot of people like to just attach laziness to procrastination. And that's not what it is, y'all. For a lot of us, we actually may be dealing with a core belief. Maybe I don't feel like I am smart enough to actually achieve that task or that goal. And so my procrastination is an avoidance tactic. I don't want to support that core belief by not achieving the task or the goal, or not coming out how I want. So that may be the source of my procrastination. So before you label yourself or allow someone to label you as lazy, I want you to ask the question, what am I afraid of? Right? Assess your resources. Okay, this is what we talked about, and I went through that. Okay, talk to people who've been through the process. Sorry, that was a typo. Meet with an MC advisor. We have a wonderful transfer planning website. So definitely access those resources and those tools. We talked about a campus visit. For many of the campuses, it may still be virtual options, and some may have some in-person options. I know they do actually have in-person options. They've restarted that. So if that is something that you want to do your best. If you have limited resources and funds, you may want to narrow that down to maybe 1 or 2 that you really want to visit in person, and maybe the others you do it online, so that you don't miss out on some opportunity and activity to be exposed to the campus. And visit the college website and talk to an advisor of that transfer institution. Here's what I want you to do as you are preparing. Write down questions that you would like answers to. What are some questions that are coming up? Know that that list is an ever evolving list. So once you write them down, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the questions, right? Because as you go through the process, other questions arise, but it's great for you to keep a record of that, so you can go back and say, hey, did I get the answer to that? I may need to go back and find out some other resources. And brainstorm the resources that you have available on your current campus. We're wrapping up here. When we're talking about taking a break, here's one of the big things that I want you to do. Plan for your breaks. Sometimes we just do it because now we're so exhausted and we're so stressed out that we have no choice but to take a break. But what would happen if you proactively plan for that break? A good rule of thumb is that if you're going to be working on a task, don't sit at it for more than an hour. At least every hour, right? Take a break, get up, do a walk, get some water, hydrate yourself, right? If you need to nourish yourself, do that. It's important. Proactively think of calming items or activities that you can easily access. You don't want to have to go scrambling and trying to figure things out, but maybe think about, you know what? It's a nice day outside. I'm going to walk around the parking lot. Or I got one of those squeezy balls that I keep on my desk or in my room. And when I'm kind of feeling the stress, let me grab that, right? It's very important to have those things at your easy access. Don't force it. We talked about this. Step away and give yourself some time to reflect. And lastly, I want you to celebrate along the way. The goal is that hopefully this process will result in you achieving your goal. So I want you to enjoy it as much as possible along the way. And that's where we get into getting those incentives so that you can celebrate.
The question that I had, when you brought up so many things at the beginning that we don't think about, that are, rumbling around in a lot of people's hearts and minds as they're thinking about this process. And the one that was new for me was the idea that we might actually regret the decisions that we've made, and that there's always room to pivot and do something else. And I'm wondering if a student finds themselves in that position, they've transferred and they're thinking, oh, I've made a terrible mistake.
Yeah.
How might you suggest that we make sure that it's not just that we're still adapting to a new environment?
Yeah, that's good. That's great. And thank you for bringing that back up. So it is very important to stop and reflect, to just take a pause. So when we talked about, like, even in the presentation, we talked about, don't force it, maybe step away for a moment. That's in that same process. If you are really feeling an unwanted emotion, it's really important for you to take a pause and to step back and to maybe ask yourself some of those reflection questions, right? What core belief may be impacting my experience? What elements on this campus, or in these classrooms, or in this experience as a whole, is really impacting me in a negative way? Why? Asking myself that question, why, continue to kind of dig down a little bit, so that one thing that it does is it kind of helps clarify maybe the root of what I am experiencing. And once we identify the root, then let's go to the assessment of, are there resources or are there augmentations to my current experience, to my current environment, that could actually alleviate some of that negativity that I am feeling, right? If after you have done all of that and you just still come back down and say, this is not for me, right? This is not what I want to do, that is okay. But because you have given yourself that opportunity to really take a pause and to reflect and to interrogate what it is you are feeling, then it definitely kind of makes that case stronger. And you're going to need that, because remember, back in the presentation, that pivot may have some consequences. And so if you are really rooted in the why you are making that pivot, you are more likely to be able to navigate or to weather some of those consequences, whether it be extra time, or whether it be maybe additional resources that are allocated to this educational experience. But that's what I would say.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great advice. It also just points out the importance of, like, catching yourself early so that you don't, spiral into a place where you're, you've shot yourself in the foot because you're worrying so much about the decisions that you made. I appreciate that. I also appreciate what you're talking about with procrastination as sometimes being something that we do to avoid some of our like worries or fears of our expectations for ourselves. And, yeah, this is such a rich area for us to just be really aware of. And I think the more aware that students are of their own experience, the better able they will be to recognize and to kind of work through some of the struggles that the transfer students have. So so appreciate that. Okay. Well, I think we will call it a night. This has really been just enlightening. I really appreciate your coming in and talking to us. Monroe, you and I will be talking. I'm so glad to see you.
You too, you as well. Thank you all. Good night.
Yes, thank you.